Alright, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of my knitting podcast. I've been away for a little bit, I've been doing some other things, but I have finally started to catch up on my knitting plans again. So I would really like to show some of the results of that today with you. So without much further ado, let's just get into my finished objects. I will briefly talk about my current works in progress, and I do still have some planned for the future as well. So let's just jump into all of that. Alright, so for my first finished object, you might think to yourself, if you've seen previous episodes, Marije, haven't you shown this one before already? But if you're very keen, you might see that the top is different. So based on some of the comments on my last episode where I showed my then finished object of this one, and really thank you so much for those comments, shout out. I finally understood what I was not getting about the petite knit pattern before for the Oslo hat, because how the comment described it to me, I finally understood that originally I had made the hat basically like this and I made it shorter because I just really didn't understand that part of the pattern was trying to tell me that the brim of the hat was supposed to be folded over, and that also makes more sense for how much yarn you would need and also how long this part of the hat still has to be. And because I really wanted to have this the finished hat for myself in this color, in the end I did end up frogging my previous hat so that I could use the yarn for this. Because I already had blocked the previous version, I also needed to quickly rinse the frogged yarn, so that was quite a lot of work. I'll put up a picture of how noodly the yarn originally looked. So now I have re-knitted it, so now it still has this folded over edge where it's knitted together, but then you fold it over again. And that was the part that really was not clicking with me originally. And now I finally have this big, luscious beanie. I actually did end up making it a little bit too big, I think, in the end, which is fine. I mean, I wanted to get an oversized beanie, and an oversized beanie is what I got. And I did end up using the other Life in the Long Grass color for the little top here. I hope it doesn't look too much like a monk's spot when I'm wearing it, but I think the colors look nice together and I'm still really happy with the result. And it is really nice and squishy. So I'm very, and the brim here is now just really nice and luscious and thick and super duper squishy. So I really do enjoy that, and I'm glad I took the trouble of knitting it the final time. I did actually forget how many stitches I ended up using for the circumference of the hat. I think it was maybe closer to it was over 100. It was either 114 or 120. I would have to look at the pattern to see, because I'm pretty sure I used one of the official hat sizes, but I don't think it was the largest one. So maybe the second to largest one, or the one before that, something like that. But it ended up working quite nicely. I think it, like I said, it could have been just a little bit smaller, which still doesn't really make sense when I look at the pattern dimensions and for what size head it's supposed to fit in the end. But this is fine. I really like it. This was the color I wanted to use. I don't think I'll be making any more beanies this season, because this was again a little bit of a slightly harrowing experience in terms of beanie knitting. But it's fine, it's done, and I have worn it and I will be wearing it. My other finished object looks a little scrungly because I did end up wearing them the day before yesterday and have not washed them since. That's fine though. I'll pop up a picture here of when they were freshly knit, and this is what they look like after one wear. I just did my regular kind of vanilla plain sock. These usually end up being quite large. They're not quite like a knee length type of sock, but I really like wearing socks like these in the winter, just stuffed in boots and stuff like that. And then sometimes you see just a little bit of the edge peeking out of the boot. And I always think that that's a nice detail. This yarn was so cute. I'm so happy with the colors. It's a lovely self-striping yarn from, let me just check the label. It's called Landlust, die Sockenwolle. I'm guessing it's a German brand, and it was just a standard 100 gram bunch of sock yarn with 20% polyamide. So that worked out fine. This was actually, usually I'm left with more when I finish a pair of socks, but in this case I'm only left with just this teeny tiny bit of sock yarn, which is fine, that will go with the scraps. And I just did my regular old schmegular thing with these. I just used my little 2.25mm Shawl goose. I really like knitting socks on these, and then I used DPNs for the heels and the toes. I casted on 64 stitches, 25 round cuff, 100 round leg of the sock without counting the rounds for the cuff, just a regular heel turn and flap, 60 stitches after gusset decreases for the body of the foot, and then just regular toe decreases until I'm left with 4 stitches, and then I Kitchener stitch and I quickly weave in the extra yarn in a fortifying way so that the toes are just extra sturdy. I just really wanted to knit something plain and simple after the next thing I'm about to show you, and this was exactly that, and I just really enjoyed the color. So the next thing I'm about to show you is kind of the pièce de résistance of this video. So this is the Nocturnal sweater by not Petite Knit but Petite Knits, I think. I'll definitely link it down below. And I did in the end convince a couple of my friends to knit this as well. And hopefully for a future podcast I will be able to show you pictures of their finished sweaters as well, but I went a little fast with it. And I really wanted to finish mine for my birthday so I could wear it on my birthday, which is exactly what I did. So I was really happy with it. So for people that are familiar with the Nocturnal sweater and are familiar with the cat pattern, you might be able to tell that my cat looks just slightly different, because I tried to make my cat on the sweater look a little bit more like my cat. Which, if you've seen previous episodes, you might think, but like, your cat is already black, so what more did you want to do? So what I actually did, my cat has kind of a little bit of a reputation of being quite grumpy. Not necessarily with me, but definitely with other people, unfortunately. So I thought it would be fun to make this cat look a little bit extra grumpy as well. So I tried to make the arch of the little cat's back a little higher. And I tried to fluff up her little tail a bit, so they would look a little bit more like they're doing the little cat crab walk, basically. And I think it worked out quite well. I used a couple of different types of yarn. The one for the yellow that I used is a little bit thicker. That one is a Lang Yarns Cloud Tweed, so that one is a bit thicker. The rest of the sweater, I just did everything on 5mm needles, and I just switched out my knitting and round needles with a smaller or a longer cable for when that was appropriate. It is knitted top down with some corrugated rib at the top and at the cuffs and at the bottom. I knitted the cropped version. I've worn it a couple of times. It was a really big challenge actually to do the 3-stranded color work. I definitely learned a lot about doing that, and I'm really glad that I did it because the result is very nice. But in general, I do tend to like just like plain stockinette knitting in the round, but I've never been as happy as I was after I finished with the color work to get back to just regular old plain stockinette knitting in the round. Because this was challenging. This was like challenging, capital C challenging. I like doing color work, but I do really appreciate it when patterns try to keep it in such a way that it is only 2 strands of color work at the same time. And this pattern for these parts, I guess you could duplicate stitch the whole cat. I'm not that good at doing duplicate stitching. I just used it a little bit for the tails because I only realized after I'd done it that I really wanted the tails to be a little bit fluffier. Also because this yellow that I used is a bit of a thicker yarn, and the black was a little bit thinner, so the tail even disappeared more, because originally it was only one line of the tail. So I'm really glad that I did some duplicate stitching there. And I guess the whole thing would have been a bit easier if you're comfortable with doing duplicate stitch, if you just do the whole thing in the yellow and then you just duplicate stitch the cat over it. I think that would have worked pretty well as well, and it would have been significantly more comfortable knitting it. So that is something you could keep in mind. There were a few little flaws here and there on the pattern, and so this was one of my first times of using a corrugated rib, and I'm really interested to hear from people that have used this technique before, because I feel like, I don't know, for this one, and this gauge is kind of fine, but I'm about to show you something else I'm doing with a corrugated rib as well, and I feel like it's not... So the pattern didn't ask me to use a different size needle for the corrugated rib, whereas usually if you're doing the ribbing for a sweater, that is to make sure that when you use stockinette stitch and you don't use any ribbing, the stockinette stitch will curl a lot. It will curl in on itself. So you put a bit of ribbing in there where you knit one, purl one, which makes a ribbing pattern in order to keep it from curling in on itself. And usually to kind of like heighten that effect and also like kind of pinch the sleeve just a little bit, you will use 1/2 size or a full size smaller of needles to do the ribbing with. This pattern didn't ask for that, and I kind of wish it had, because this part I would have liked if it was just like a little bit more scrunched, a little bit more thicker, and just more of like a classic rib. I do really like visually like the corrugated rib, so I'm not quite aware or sure if this is just like a corrugated rib thing where you just generally don't size your needle down when you're doing corrugated rib, or if that is something that I should like try and do for my next knit, basically, because I think that's one of the few things that I didn't really like about the pattern. Also, the pattern didn't say to put one extra row of your main color between the corrugated rib and the bind off, and maybe I just don't have enough different types of bind off in my arsenal. Also, there were no instructions of like, this is the best way this is the best type of bind off to use for this sweater. So I was finicking around with it a little bit, because originally I just dove straight into an Italian bind off without an extra row of the main color, but I could not figure out a way to make that look nice, so I got really frustrated and I kind of like back sewed some of the Italian bind off that I was doing. That was really frustrating. Did not like that. And then I got so frustrated that I was just like, well, never mind. I just knitted one extra row in plain stockinette stitch with my main color, and then I just did a knit two together, and then put the stitch back on the needle and like keep just knitting two together for a regular bind off. But without putting in that extra row and without like specific instructions on like which type of bind off to use, I really couldn't figure out how to make this look nice without doing these things that I just mentioned that were not in the pattern. So that was a little frustrating to me, and I don't understand what other approach I could have taken. I think it looks fine. I think it could have looked better potentially, and I would have appreciated a little bit more instructions for that, and for me to not just have to kind of like flounder my way through that. I did update the other people in the knitting group that are also knitting the same sweater, so hopefully they will not run into the same frustrations as I did, because that was definitely a little annoying. Because for this one, for instance, you cast on with this contrast color, and I think you do one more row of the contrast color and then you jump into the corrugated ribbing. So that makes sense, because then you have the top that is just like nice like this. But especially with like how visible the underside of this bind off is, I don't understand that there were not more specific instructions for that. But beyond that, that's fine. I really like the yarn that I chose for this. I have some labels here. So my main color was Lang Yarn's Harmony, which is partially a BB alpaca with some nylon in there. So hopefully that means that it won't like stretch as alpaca is sometimes wont to do. And this type of thread is also interesting. Here is what I have left over. I think I had 3 balls of this, and it was just a general, I think, yeah, 100 grams, 260 meters, and I used the majority of 2, or I used all of 2 and then a little bit of this one as well. And this is that type of thread that is just kind of like this kind of chain almost. I don't always like using stuff like this, but for this project I think it was a really nice pick. I don't knit with larger needles that often, and this was one of the few types of yarn where I actually liked the color selection. It's very soft, so I like that, and it still seems like relatively sturdy now that I have finished knitting with it. It does feel sometimes a little fragile when I'm just touching the ball of yarn like this, but I think it worked out quite nicely. I think these have no color names, but I will just quickly show you the color name on the screen right now. So if you are also as enamored as I was, like clearly I'm very much in a kind of lilac-y purple mood right now. So this was a very happy find for me. I still have a little bit of the black left, and I also have a little bit of the kind of burgundy reddish color left. And yeah, it was a good project. It was really fun. It was quite challenging, but it was definitely worth it in the end, and I'm super happy with the results. I think it looks so cute, and I really enjoyed wearing it as well. And currently it is kind of the perfect sweater weather as well, so I'm really happy that I finished it on time so that I can still wear it plenty of times during the upcoming colder months. So those were all my finished objects for the moment. Now let me go on to my current whips. So I am still working on my Librarian Vest at the moment. Let me just quickly flip it inside out. I'm still a little bit unhappy with how kind of loosey-goosey this ribbing looks at the bottom. I really should have washed the yarn after I extracted it from this other project, but I do hope that, and I think I should have used a smaller gauge needle for that as well, but I do really hope that after blocking it, it's going to look a little bit more cohesive. And the little stitch pattern still looks really, really cute. I haven't been that into picking this one up recently because I've just been very into knitting that cat sweater, and I really had that deadline of I wanted to be able to wear it for my birthday, which I was able to do. And also currently it is more like full sweater weather and not so much sweater vest weather. Let's not try and say that 3 times fast. Next up, I had my birthday and some of my lovely friends gave me some lovely sock yarn. I will actually show you some of the other sock yarn that they got. It was one of them, and I always like having some plain vanilla socks on the go because they're just one of the easiest things for me to knit when I'm watching some of my shows. So this one is not very far along, but it will eventually also become a beautiful pair of socks. Look at this color variation. I don't think this will be kind of self-striping, but not in the way like these other socks where they had like really the little patterns in there. I think this will be a little bit more of a gradient. It looks really nice. It is a Lana Grossa yarn. It's called Meilenveld, and I am very excited to be knitting with it. It feels a lot softer than a lot of the other sock yarns that I usually use. So I'm going to try, and it's also, I think, a little bit less yardage. It's still 100 grams. It's called Dusk, the type of yarn. I think the Landlust yarn was 100 grams and it was 460 meters. This one is 100 grams and it is 400 meters. So I think just to err on the side of caution, I will change up my amount of rows for the leg. I think I will not do my standard 100 rows and I will instead only do 70. So it will be a little bit of a shorter sock, more like normal size sock, and I will hopefully not run out of yarn. But I am thinking of using a little bit of contrast yarn from some of the other yarns that I have, so I might use some of this Undercover Otter sock yarn in Squirm. I think it's Squirm. I think that would look really good together. So if I do think I might end up running out, I will use this for a contrast heel and toe probably. That seems to me like it could be really fun. And my other current favorite whip that has been taking up a lot of my attention because I would like to finish it eventually. I actually transferred this from, I had it on longer metal knitting and around needles with a fixed cable, but I ended up switching it to my slightly longer, shorter version of the Chow Goose. I will show you a picture of the pattern here, and I'm going to try and show you a little bit of what I've been doing, but as you may know, I tend to knit stuff in what other people like to call inside out. So my pattern is over here on the inside, and then the outside has what will eventually be the inside, where you can see how I'm catching all of my floats. I have definitely learned a thing or two about catching floats from knitting my cat sweater. So I am putting those newfound skills into practice. I have finally been convinced to use a combination of continental and English style knitting. So I keep one of the colors in one hand and the other color in the other hand all the time. And that way, that's been really helpful. I was always just kind of stubborn, and I was just like, no, I think when you hold the yarn in your left hand, you're a continental knitter. I've always been quite stubborn with that, and I've always just been like, no, I'm a continental knitter, that's just what I do. So I want to always have my working yarn in my left hand as I'm knitting, and that was just the most comfortable to me. But as I'm doing more color work, and especially with that sweater, I just really needed to change up the way I did that a little bit. And I'm really reaping the benefits from that in my future knitting endeavors. That's clear to me. So now I feel really confident and comfortable just holding the one thread in the one hand and the other thread in the other hand, and then I just switch my style of knitting between continental and English depending on which thread color I'm pulling for my next stitch. Let me... this is a little loose on here, so let me just try and flip it inside out a little bit so I can show you. This will be another little cowl. The purple in here is the foxglove color from King Fiber with their partial yak base. The little rainbow color. Here, let me just show it to you properly. I hope you can see the little stag beetle that is starting to emerge. The more rainbowy color is the high twist merino sock yarn from Life in the Long Grass, where I said before that I feel a little bit unsure about using that for socks because there is no nylon in there. So I felt a little bit more confident to at least use part of it in more a cowl project. I really hope it's going to be big enough to fit over my head. Always a concern for me, as I've mentioned in the past, but we'll see. It's still because I was very diligent and careful with catching my floats, so it is still relatively stretchy. So we'll see how it will end up working out for me. But the little beetles are emerging. It's very cute. I often run a bit hot, so I often don't quite wear really big scarves, so a little cowl like this is often perfect for me to just warm that little part of my neck that otherwise might be exposed to the elements. And I'm really happy that even though it's a little bit cramped on here, but knitting them on these little shorty Chow needles has been a really good decision, because they kept getting, they were really stretched on the needles that they were on before. I think the ones that they were on before were either 40 or 60 centimeters in total, and these I think are quite a bit shorter. They're maybe like 25 to 30, and this works much better for me. I do have to be more careful that it's not going to slip off of the needles, but it's far easier to just kind of like move it round and around. So I'm really excited about that. You can see that I'm excited about it because it is in my favorite project bag, which is my pink holographic one, which I was very much like using. I am anticipating that I will finish these within like another day or half day of knitting, because I'm mostly done with the stag beetles. I just need to do the rest of the head and then the actual like stag horns, and then I just need to do a little bit more of this cute little color work pattern, and then the last bit of corrugated ribbing again, and then they're basically done. But yeah, they're turning out really cute. Sorry I keep showing this part, but I just really don't want to accidentally slip them off the needles. Alright, I have gathered up all my new additions. This is a revisit. I had purchased it before and it made its way back to me again, and I really didn't like the original color, so I decided to dye it. Originally it is a undercover otter color. You can still kind of see the neon green little flecks in there. I like those. I'm glad we can still see some of that. But the rest of it was predominantly white, and I really just wanted to make it quite purpley and with a little bit of pink in there, so that is exactly what I did. So I am excited to make something else with that soon. High chance that I will make a little pair of these types of arm sleeves again. I've been really enjoying them. These sweaters where the sleeves are just a little bit shorter and also my arms are just like a little bit long in general. I really like adding just a little bit of a separate sleeve on there. It's really cozy and it's also really modular, so when I overheat a little bit I can quite easily take them off again. And I really enjoy making stuff like that. It's just super easy, just on little knitting in around needles, and you can just kind of like hammer them out quite fast. So it's kind of like a satisfying little in-between knit as well. So for my birthday, some of my lovely friends got me some sock yarn. Amongst them, the one that I showed you that I already started with, and another friend got me these two lovely colors. Definitely up my alley, this little rainbow one and this one more purely pink with a little bit of orangey and a little bit of reddy colors. I am not yet sure. Let me first say, like, they are both from Lana Grossa. Color mix multi, merino with 25% nylon. I really like this. This is single ply, and because I knit them, I've talked about this before, but because I knit them on such small needles, these actually, even though they are single ply, make really nice and sturdy socks for me that I tend to be able to wear quite often without them wearing down too much. If you use a single, I'll stop waving this around. If you do end up using a single ply sock yarn like this, I think it is good to use kind of like definitely err on the smaller needle size, because that will just make a kind of denser fabric. So that also means that the fibers are kind of more clumped together, which means they become more coherent and they grab into themselves a bit more, and it makes just like a more sturdy type of fabric. So for sock knitting, in my opinion, it's completely fine to use a single ply, but you do have to kind of like adjust your gauge accordingly, and then it's absolutely fine. If you would do this with a larger needle, you would get a drapier fabric, less dense, and then it also becomes more prone to problematic wear and tear from actually wearing the socks into boots and stuff like that. I still have, I've shown these before, but I still have these two as well. This is the same brand as the other ones. I think this as well, even though the label is just like slightly different. So I am hoping to just basically kind of combine all of these in different ways with maybe contrast, toes and heels. Maybe I will use a little bit of this one as well, or maybe some of these, maybe this one for like the pinky one or something like that. I'm not sure yet, but I do see many happy sock knitting endeavors in my near future, so I'm very happy to be so stocked up like that. In terms of future knitting plans, I am still toying with the idea of knitting the color Craze shawl. I did buy the pattern already, but when I basically didn't spend the time I thought I would spend on knitting that shawl knitting, I ended up doing a bunch of other things and knitting kind of fell to the wayside. So I still have the pattern, I have the yarn ready, but I'm at the moment not entirely convinced that that is one of the things that I'm going to be doing anytime soon. We'll see. We'll see. I do like wearing a little shawl, especially with the way where I cross it in front of me, but again, it is more just like actual bulky sweater weather at the moment, so I'm not sure when or if I'll get around to that. I'll just wait and see if or when inspiration hits me for that. But one of the other things that I have been feeling inspired by is I've been seeing the Halibut Sweater here and there. Love that it's only a two-stranded colorwork sweater. And because I love my cat sweater so much, and I think the Halibut Sweater just looks absolutely gorgeous. And when I bought all that other yarn for the cat sweater, I did end up picking up this one. It is a Lang Yarns Cloud Tweed Superwash, and it has these wonderful colors that are actually far more reminiscent of kind of my summer color palette, but I just couldn't pass it up. It looks so fun. It's very large though, so I kind of sillily thought that this, in combination with some other leftovers that I have, like the same brand, this is also a Lang Yarns Cloud Tweed. I thought I could just combine it and it would be enough for a sweater, but I think actually I don't want to quite combine it like this. It also would not work, for instance, for the contrast for the Halibut Sweater. So right now I'm thinking I will actually maybe pick up one more bowl of this color, and I am not entirely sure, and I want to kind of use that for the Halibut Sweater. I'm not entirely sure what contrast color I want to use. I'm kind of leaning towards black, but I'm not 1000% committed. I'm thinking either black or dark green, which I think could also look really nice with this. Let me just check. They are saying that for a full sweater, you would need around 300 grams. So they say 3 balls. I usually use a bit less, but I can supplement for like a little bit of the arms and stuff with stuff like this. So I think just buying one more and then maybe a dark green contrast color, or using the leftover black from my cat sweater. Like I said, this is a bigger gauge. It is recommending you to use 6 to 7 millimeter needles, and the Halibut Sweater is made on smaller needles than this. I think it's actually made for a fingering weight yarn, but I'm thinking I will use the general gist of the cat sweater pattern. I might even be doing a corrugated rib type situation again, but I'm not entirely sure how that would mix with the halibut graphic that comes in along the neckline. So I'll meditate on that for a little bit. But I'm thinking of using the general setup of the nocturnal sweater and then kind of like projecting the halibut graphic onto there, which is a little bit adventurous, but I think it will probably be fine. I'll need to do some light mathing to make sure that all works out, and I need to pick myself up another one of these. Otherwise, if I don't think that's going to be good, then I will just make maybe a plain sweater with this type of yarn, and then I will just use the prescribed like gauge and needles and everything for the halibut sweater, because I do think it looks gorgeous, and I would like to make it probably this cold season. So we'll see how that goes, but I am really excited to work with this yarn. So if you see me with Bertje, you usually know what time of the podcast it is. It means that it's time to sign off. I have shared my finished projects, my whips, and my hopes and dreams for my current knitting future. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast again, even though it has taken me a while to get back to it. I hope the lighting isn't too weird, but it has been very dark and gloomy, which is my preferred type of weather, so I've been having a really good time, and I hope the lighting is kind of doable like this. I will judge and adjust accordingly when I'm editing it, and see you next time, basically. Bert and I are signing off. Bye!